Okay, you're an idiot. This is John Holstrom, founding editor of Punk Magazine. You're listening to Dying Scene Radio.
Dying Scene Radio. Dying Scene, Dying Scene, Dying Scene, Dying Scene, Dying Scene Radio. Dying Scene Radio. Dying Scene Radio. Dying Scene Radio.
We're on the Lower East Side of Manhattan at the Arturo Vega. Was it it's Howl happening?
Howl happening in Arturo Vega Project.
Yeah, he was a big punk rock graphic artist. Is that right?
Very big. You know, he designed the Trash and Vaudeville logo.
Yeah.
In addition to doing the Ramones T-shirt.
And you did a lot of Ramones stuff too. You're a punk pioneer, is that right?
Yeah, they call us pioneers because we're the ones lying in the prairie with the arrows in our back.
Yeah, you're actually the founder of Punk Magazine, and we're here today at the museum that we just mentioned because they're having the 40th anniversary exhibit here for Punk Magazine. Is that correct?
It's happening right now.
That's right. And CBGBs, you're a pioneer. You're in the CBGB movie, the 2013 film. Right?
They were so wonderful. They brought me down to the set, and I was there at the recreated CBGBs.
Didn't you consult with some of the actors at all?
No.
No?
No, nobody consulted with anybody except Lisa. Lisa was the main consultant for this script.
Right.
That's Hilly's daughter, who's the main character in the movie. I'm a minor character.
Yeah, but it starts off with you. Right there. And actually
sure
what
does.
it says something to the effect of most people think that punk started at 315 Bowery, the address of CBGB's, and but they're wrong. It started in a basement somewhere in Connecticut. Where is this somewhere?
I didn't really grow up with a basement. They kind of threw that in there just to, it's called creative license. It's not a documentary, but it does introduce the fact that Punk Magazine started the movement.
Right, and that happened in Connecticut.
No, but sort of. I was hanging out with two people I knew growing up. It was after I left high school, and I went back for a summer, and I hung out with Jed Dunn and Eddie McNeil. Our pictures over there at CBGB's in '76, and that's when we started talking about working together and starting a magazine someday. So it sort of did start there.
I asked because we just came down from Connecticut, me and my entourage. We just took a field trip down here, meet you. And so, hey, I figured a fellow Connecticut person.
Oh, you're from Connecticut?
Yeah.
Oh, whereabouts?
Fairfield County area. Actually, it's Bridgeport. It's the armpit of Connecticut.
Oh, that's bad down there.
Yeah. See, if punk rock started in Bridgeport, that'd be all right? I mean, it's kind of grimy, but it...
Cheshire looks nice, but it always had this underbelly of sleaze. Because I was there,
Yeah, and actually going back to that movie, many people debate on where punk was, where its first inception happened, New York or London.
Here's the thing. I'm not a creationist. I believe in evolution, not just for the species, but also for movements. There's no such thing as a first punk or the first punk band, and people have to get off this whole first thing,
Yeah.
Like they say, success has 1,000 fathers, failure is an orphan. So I figure I started it because when punk finally went under, I was the orphan. So?
Yeah. And so, all right, so at the time when you created punk, Jimmy Carter was president, and he wasn't a fan of punk rock, was he?
No, I'm going to present tonight evidence that he was so deep in bed with Southern rock music, the Allman Brothers, Marshall Tucker Band.
Well, he's a pea farmer.
Peanut farmer.
Whatever, yeah. So, that sounds like his type of music right there.
Yes. And I did hear back in the day that he was on the White House lawn at a jazz festival saying, we got to stop this punk rock thing.
Mm-hmm. And therefore you started a comic book based on rock and roll, right?
Well, I did that before I knew about Carter wasn't even president yet, I don't think, when we started.
Okay.
So I think he was still in the primaries.
Okay, but then you voted for Reagan, though, isn't that right? I read somewhere.
Reagan?
I read somewhere
He
you
wasn't
voted,
running back then.
I read somewhere that you voted for Reagan when it came down to it because Jimmy Carter
Oh,
was.
yes, I did that to get rid of Carter. I would do anything to get rid of Carter.
So getting back, okay, so you created a comic book based on punk rock music, right? Why do you suppose graphic art and punk rock are so in line?
I always thought that comics and rock and roll had a common thread. Like back in the 50s, you had EC Comics, and there were crime comics and juvenile delinquent comics and horror comics and Mad Magazine. Mm-hmm. And that kind of fit with the Coasters and Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis and the kind of rock music you had. And then when you got to the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and the British invasion, well, Marvel Comics had the Fantastic Four, while the Beatles were the Fab Four, right? And you had that kind of energy with the superheroes and the supergroups all happening at once. Then when the psychedelic rock bands came out in the late 60s, you had underground comics and psychedelic art. So when I saw punk rock coming, I wanted to make punk art.
Makes sense.
Yeah, well, I dressed just like the Ramones. I wore
and you got to interview a lot of your heroes, right?
Well, they weren't really my heroes.
No?
No.
How does it feel
Punk
having...
doesn't have any heroes.
Punk doesn't have any heroes?
Nah. We were trying to stop that whole mindset of rock musicians being like gods on a pedestal,
Right. Yeah, I know that's a lot of the same ethos is shared by some of the writers like Lester Bangs, right?
Yes.
Didn't he kind of like pave the way? Don't treat the artist like he's on some kind of pedestal.
We took a lot of inspiration from Lester and other writers at the time.
How many weeks or months did it take to put an issue together?
We interviewed the Ramones and Lou Reed on Thanksgiving weekend, and the magazine started rolling on New Year's Eve.
And what was is it Tom Forcade
Tom
or Forcade?
Forcade.
Forcade?
Well, you could say it Forcade or Forcade.
What was his contribution to the magazine?
He prevented us from going out of business. Mm-hmm. He came along and published The Legend of Nick Detroit Behind Me.
Right.
He had an idea to start an entire underground or alternative magazine distribution network.
UPS? Is that the same thing?
He did work on the early UPS, the Underground Press Syndicate, but they changed their name to APS. And one thing he did, it was kind of the internet of its day. He got all the underground newspapers on microfilm and distributed the microfilms to all the libraries across the country. And this paid a fee to all the underground newspapers to help keep them in business.
Mm-hmm. And then, so what happened to issue number 9, Punk number 9?
I never really found out, and that's one reason we're having this event tonight.
Okay. What do you suspect happened?
I think we had a government employee on our payroll, and he took it on himself to find a way to kill it, because we had Kiss on the cover, and William Burroughs' book excerpt from Junkie inside, along with some very other provocative material. So I'm sure they were afraid we were going to turn the whole country into little punk rockers. They couldn't let that happen. Couldn't let that happen.
The shooting of Larry Flint and Forsythe's suicide marked the end of punk. Punk magazine lived fast and died. It only, was it 17 or 18 issues?
15.
15 issues.
In the 70s.
And much like many of the artists portrayed within, though, it did have like a short life, right? A burst, and
3.5 years.
It was the most important magazine in the world for 1 year. What was it like to ride that crazy wave?
A lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's like I had a front row seat to the whole show.
Yeah.
I got to go on the Sex Pistols tour thanks to Tom Forcade.
If these guys weren't your heroes, what were we going to call them? I mean, there's just awesome artists.
My favorite
you got
musicians.
excited. I mean,
my
right?
favorite musicians,
Yeah.
Is that good?
What is it about punk rock music? It's so awesome, right? I mean, it's
Listen to
so
it. It's
fast.
great.
It
Yeah.
has great lyrics.
How can anybody
It's the
not
best
like
music,
it,
right?
I think the Southern rock bands must have heard it and said, uh-oh, we can't let this happen. It's going to put us out of business. We're not going to be zillionaires anymore. We're just going to be millionaires. So
all the original Ramones are dead. Lou Reed passed away a few years ago. CBGB's is closed. The title of our online zine is called Dying Scene. And
we were the first to die. Back in 79.
Punk lives on. It evolves. New bands emerge, but those trailblazers who created the scene and the genre are dropping like flies. Do you still listen to punk rock?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah.
Any favorite bands?
The Bullies right now in New York. They play every 9/11 because their founding member was a firefighter who died at the World Trade Center.
Oh, really?
It was a wacky funeral. So I walk in there and there's firefighters standing guard all over the place. I almost bump into Rudy Giuliani and Judy, his girlfriend. He had just given a little memorial speech for the guy. And then you see punk rockers in leather jackets all over the place. Strange mixture, right?
Mm-hmm. But that's why you came here, right? In New York City, and you never left from somewhere in Connecticut, right?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to be a cartoonist anywhere else, yeah.
Yeah. Punk was an underground movement cultivated by independent, almost homemade journals or fanzines. Most
It's still
notably,
going on.
I know, absolutely. Well, that's what I'm leading up to. You know, nowadays these homemade journals are still in existence. They just moved online. What are your feelings about new media, such as the online publications or podcasting, for instance? How do you suppose these new forms of media will help support the punk movement in the future?
Well, what's kind of interesting to me is how often I hear from punks in Russia or the Ukraine.
Or Poland?
You know, punk is much bigger in Europe than here in New York or elsewhere in the States. There's little holdouts all over the world. Like we have a T-shirt exhibition here, and as you can see, our biggest market was in Japan.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
We can't get a dime per cup of coffee here in New York.
They love the cartoon art, the manga or whatever, right? They love that kind of art.
Oh,
in
manga,
Japan.
yeah.
Yeah, manga. So it makes perfect sense. The Lower East Side, which is really the birthplace of punk, I think. It was such a different place in the late 70s and early 80s. Gentrification has reshaped this neighborhood so significantly. Has the sun finally set on the fledgling New York artist? I mean, I know you're here and everything, but is it?
Yeah, I'm
a lot of
afraid
people
so,
are moving, right? They're like going to the West Coast.
We all moved here for the cheap rents.
This is the financial capital now. Now there's nobody, there's like no artists anymore.
Well, there's
it's hard
still
to
plenty
survive.
of us old artists left, but I don't see many young artists moving here. Nobody can afford to move here.
Mm-hmm.
In about 50 years, it's going to be underwater from global warming. So it's not a good time to move here. But I'm doing a panel discussion next week on why punk rock had to start in New York City.
Okay,
And
why?
Basically, the premise is the hippie scene happened in the 60s, and New York was the epitome of everything they hated. They wanted to go back to nature. I'm going to play a couple Country Joe and the Fish songs. I don't know if you heard of them, but one is Goodbye, New York City, the subway is not the underground. You know, these hippies just hated this place. So,
Interesting. What about the Beat Generation and everything that came out of here, though? Didn't that contribute to hippiness?
Punks related more to beats than hippies. Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
You know, we had poetry readings in
Ginsberg,
CBGBs.
everybody's here.
Patti Smith soaked up the spirit of that movement very much.
Saw that in the movie.
Yeah.
Like they had a little,
Well, that's a joke, you know. It's a funny movie. It's just like, you know, people should laugh at it.
It was well. I
But
liked
people
it.
get
I
all
enjoyed
serious, and they're like, well, there wasn't this and it wasn't that.
Let me ask you a question. Where can we find a decent illustrator? I make T-shirts, okay, and screen printer by trade. Always looking. I'm a graphic artist, but I can't draw. Where can you find an illustrator with enough gumption who's gonna, like you know, put in all the effort? Everybody wants to get paid right away. Nobody wants to do any kind of entrepreneurial venture. What's the deal, man? Where should I look?
Depends on what style you want. Every illustrator draws in a different style, and probably what you want to do is, well, depends on what kind of realism you want. But if you go to one of these small zine or comic book events, you're going to see their work on display, and you'll be able to choose what you want to
That's
use.
a good tip.
You know?
That's
Yeah.
a good tip.
Yeah. Support the small underground zine scene.
You've interviewed so many people, though. Like Lou Reed. Starting off, getting thrown right into the ring with him. What's it like getting interviewed by idiots like me?
You're not an idiot. I have been interviewed by many idiots.
Have
you
you?
are not an idiot. Yes.
So you don't, okay, good. You don't suffer fools. Thank you.
Oh, back in the 70s, you wouldn't believe it. I think the biggest idiot who ever interviewed me was from Newsweek.
Okay, why? Do you
I
remember-
spent an hour with him, and he used like 2 lines from me that I never said. That happens a lot,
Yeah.
especially in big media.
I find myself asking a lot of off-the-cuff questions, though, at times while conducting interviews due to either spontaneity or a lack of preparation or, sometimes genuine stupidity. How did you prepare for interviews back then? Didn't they they announced the lineup right then the day of, so you must not have had a lot of preparation sometimes when you're interviewing these
But I
bands,
usually
right?
had a lot of preparation.
What was some of the?
And I would usually interview someone whose work I admired, so I didn't need much.
Did you ever find yourself asking just stupid questions?
When I interviewed Blue Oyster Cult, most of the band was very unhelpful. I think they had like a negative attitude towards punk rock, so they were just difficult. It didn't. Usually, there's an energy and a kind of a chemistry that goes on when you interview someone like we have going now.
Mm-hmm. I
Like
feel
I'm listening to you and you're listening to me.
I'm trying.
Yeah.
It's hard though, right? Because
AC/DC was hard too.
You have the questions that
When
you're trying to ask, but you're trying to be in the moment too at the same time.
Well, the ideal interview is to do it like at a place like this where I'm surrounded by my work and I have time for you.
Mm-hmm.
But we talked to AC/DC once, and they were at CBS Records, and it's one of these clusterfucks. Everybody got 20 minutes with them, and you get them late in the day. They're talked out and bored.
I thought of a great T-shirt graphic for AC/DC. You want to hear it really quick?
Sure.
OCDC, and you have Angus Young washing his hands. Either that or just his closet, and there's a whole closet full of the boys' suits.
Okay, you're an idiot.
Last question. Will you eat at the new CBGB restaurant the next time you're flying out of Newark International Airport?
I was asked about that by the Villager just the other day. Mm-hmm. I'm like over CBGB's. It closed 10 years ago. I don't care if it's a restaurant in an airport or a toilet bowl down the street. It's like
It served its its time, and now it's a memory, and now
things change, things evolve. This is life. There's more important things to worry about than some restaurant in an airport. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's some serious things in this world that we should be paying attention to, and we should be having fun, not dwell on negative shit like that, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, John, for speaking with me. I really appreciate it. Everybody
Thanks
should
for
come out and
having
check
me.
out his work over at Howl, and Howl Happening and
Arturo
Arturo
Vega
Vega
Project.
Project on the Lower East Side.